Railway bosses say the scenes of wreckage will be etched on the industry's mind forever. And today in court, Network Rail was fined £6.7 million after admitting a series of failings which led to the deaths of 3 people in that fatal crash 3 years ago. The train derailed near Stonehaven after hitting a landslide that followed heavy rain. The driver of the train, Brett McCulloch, conductor Donald Dinny and a passenger, Christopher Stutchbury, died from their injuries. Rail unions say the fine offers no comfort. Ben Phillip reports from the High Court in Aberdeen.
Very few people who saw these images would ever forget them, Lord Matthews told the High Court in Aberdeen. But as he sentenced Network Rail to pay a fine of £6.7 million, his focus was on those who had died or suffered injury or loss.
Distressing as these images are, they were only of machines. Their loss pales into insignificance compared to that of those who tragically lost loved ones in the calamity and those who were passengers on the train. No penalty I can impose will come close to compensating all those whose lives have been touched by what happened, particularly when they know that it could all have been avoided.
Driver Brett McCulloch, conductor Donald Dinny and passenger Christopher Stutchbury died when the ScotRail service crashed south of Stonehaven after hitting a landslide. 6 other passengers were injured. Early on the 12th of August 2020, there had been extreme torrential rain leading to flooding on the line. Network Rail pleaded guilty to failures in extreme weather planning and drainage and admitted failing to warn the driver that part of the track was unsafe or tell him to reduce his speed.
It's not enough, is it? But that's what it is. I mean, basically, they just held their hands up and put it down to climate change again. You know, not the incompetence of the actual rail company. At the end of the day, the train shouldn't have gone out. End of story. I've got 3 grandchildren up here. They're growing up without a father. You know, he loved the job, and he shouldn't have died.
The fine is one of the biggest ever handed down against a rail company in the UK. However, one trade union has called for more accountability.
The fine that's been levelled now for Network Rail is going to be inadequate. As the relatives of Donald Dinny, one of our own, said in their remarks, it's effectively the government paying themselves a fine. The lessons haven't been learned because we still haven't got adequate weather management systems. We still haven't got adequate management of railway assets.
Today, Network Rail's most senior representative in Scotland said the country's railways were safe.
Clearly what happened 3 years ago was deeply regrettable, and we send our sympathies to the victims' families and the survivors who had to endure that terrible day 3 years ago.
Given the scale of this tragedy and all that's emerged since it happened back in August 2020, shouldn't you be considering your position?
I think, as I've said during the investigation, no one individual was found at fault. Clearly fundamental failings on the part of Network Rail were found, which is why since the day of the accident we've been taking the steps necessary to keep the rail network safe.
It's been announced that a fatal accident inquiry will be held into the crash. The aim, to avoid a similar incident happening again.
And Ben Phillip is in Stonehaven for us tonight. Ben, we heard that moving comment from the driver's father. What do you sense from being in court yourself that the families are taking away from this hearing?
Well, Sally, this was a real milestone for all those involved in this tragedy, hearing Network Rail accept responsibility. Many of them in court today to hear Lord Matthews deliver his sentencing. This case also offered an opportunity for some of them to speak publicly for the first time about this event. We heard of physical, psychological and financial scars people have been left with, people being robbed of time together, and how this whole event could have been avoided if it weren't for Network Rail's catalogue of failures. Conductor Donald Dinny's partner, Trish Ewan, says it's right that Network Rail is being prosecuted and that any financial penalty should be invested in making the railways safer. It's clear that whilst this criminal case has now come to an end, the trauma of what happened on that day, not far from this station here in Stonehaven, will be lifelong for all those involved.
Ben, thank you very much.